Kirito was a superstar solo player. He had mapped out more of the labyrinth than some big guilds put together. Meanwhile, he and Asuna were supposed to be on a short break, just a few weeks of relaxation. But Asuna couldn't shake off the feeling that she was hogging Kirito's time. "Let's take things one step at a time," Kirito said with a smile, glancing over at Yui as she drifted off to sleep. "Let's head to the town of beginnings," one of them suggested. "We might be able to find her family there. She's definitely one of a kind in this game, so if anyone knows her, it's probably someone in her family." It made sense, but Asuna felt a pang of hesitation. She didn't want to leave the little girl behind. Something about her was special, and Asuna had already grown attached. Asuna had always imagined a life with just Kirito by her side. But now she was surprisingly okay with adding one more person to the mix. It felt like Yui was their kid. When Asuna thought about what that really meant, her face turned bright red all the way up to her ears. "Hey, what's wrong?" someone asked. Asuna quickly shook her head and said, "And nothing." But she was definitely hiding something behind that blush. "Hey, let's make a plan," Asuna said, quickly clearing the table. "When Yui wakes up we should head to the town of beginnings. And we can post an ad in the newspaper too." She was talking fast, trying not to look at Kirito. Meanwhile, Yui was snoozing peacefully in her chair. Her face looked way more relaxed than it did last night. After a while they gently moved Yui to the bed, where she slept soundly for the rest of the morning. Asuna started to get really worried. Was Yui gonna fall asleep again and not wake up? But just as lunch was ready, the little girl's eyes popped open. Asuna had made a special treat just for Yui. But when it was time to eat, Yui wasn't interested in the pie at all. Instead, she was fascinated by Kirito's sandwich, which was covered in mustard. "Are you sure, Yui?" "Oh, this is super spicy," someone warned, but Yui was not afraid. "I want what Papa's having," she said. Kirito smiled. "Okay, but you have to be brave. Trying new things is important." He handed Yui a big sandwich, and she opened her mouth as wide as she could. Then she took a huge bite. Everyone watched her, wondering what would happen. Yui chewed slowly, looking very serious. Finally she swallowed and broke into a big smile. Yummy," she said. Kirito burst out laughing. "You're so brave," he exclaimed, rubbing her head. "Whoa, let's not go crazy with the super spicy food tonight," someone said. But Asuna was thinking about something else. She knew that if they found Yui's guardian in the town of beginnings, it would mean saying goodbye to Yui soon. That thought made Asuna feel a little sad and lonely again. Just then, Yui finished her sandwich and started sipping on some milk tea. She looked happy and content. Asuna turned to her and said, "Hey Yui, want to go on an adventure outside this afternoon?" Yui's face scrunched up in confusion. "Trip," she repeated, clearly not sure what Asuna was talking about. Kirito thought for a moment before explaining things to Yu. "We're going on a mission to find your friends," he said with a smile, but Yu looked confused.
"What are friends?" she asked.
Kirito and Asuna exchanged a curious glance. There were still many things they didn't understand about Yui's situation. It wasn't that she had forgotten how to do things, but more like her memories had big gaps in them. Asuna thought to herself, if we can just find the person who's supposed to take care of Yui, that would be a huge help. She wanted to make sure Yui was safe and sound. So Kirito tried to explain what friends were in a way that would make sense to Yui. "A friend is someone who will help you out and be there for you," he said. "Come on, let's get ready." Yu raised an eyebrow, but she nodded and stood up. She was wearing a pretty white dress with big puffy sleeves, but it wasn't exactly warm. The material was super thin, and it was way too chilly outside for something like that. Being cold isn't fun, and it can make you feel really uncomfortable, though it won't give you the flu or anything. Asuna started searching through her virtual closet, and found some cozy clothes. She pulled out a few thick items, and then found a perfect sweater for Yui. But then she stopped suddenly. Oops, she remembered something important. To put on new clothes or equipment, you had to attach them to your virtual mannequin in the status menu first. Imagine you're playing a super cool virtual reality game like SAO, but there's a problem. It's hard for the game to make soft things like clothes and water look real. So when you wear clothes in the game, they don't really act like separate objects that you can play with. Instead, they just kind of move with your body. Kirito noticed that Asuna was being super cautious, so he asked Yui a question. Hey Yui, can you open your window? He said, but Yui just looked at them with a confused expression. She didn't understand what they were asking her to do. Kirito tried again. Okay, just move your finger down in the air, he said, trying to help her figure it out. Check it out, Kirito said with a grin. He flicked his finger and a cool purple window popped up underneath his hand. You tried to copy him, but nothing showed up. Just as I thought, Kirito said, looking concerned. There must be a glitch in the system. And this is a pretty bad one. We can't even check our status. Nothing's working, Kirito exclaimed, biting his lip in frustration. You tried waving her right index finger, but that didn't do anything. So, she switched to her left hand and voila! A bright purple window popped up. Yuka let out a thrilled giggle, while Asuna and Kirito exchanged shocked glances over her head. What was happening? Asuna's curiosity got the best of her. Hey you, can I take a peek? She asked, crouching down to look at the window. But all she saw was a blank purple screen. Asuna had an idea. Let me see your hand. Yukon, she said gently, taking Yukon's small hand in hers. She moved Yukon's pointer finger over the spot where she thought the share with friends checkbox might be. And, bingo, the window suddenly filled up with all sorts of info, beeping to signal that it was now visible to everyone. Asuna tried really hard not to be nosy, especially since snooping at someone's status screen was super rude. So she focused on Yui's item list instead. But then her eyes wandered, and she saw something that made her jaw drop.
What is this?
She blurted out in surprise. In the online game SAO, every player has a special menu with 3 main sections at the top. Imagine you're playing your favorite game and you look at your character's info screen. Normally you'd see your player's name in big letters at the top, along with 2 thin bars that show how much health, HP and experience EXP you have. On one side of the screen there's a cool mannequin that shows off all your awesome equipment. On the other side you've got a list of buttons that let you choose what actions to take. The really cool thing is that you can customize the icons on these buttons to look however you want. There are tons of designs to pick from, but no matter how you customize it, the basic layout of the screen stays the same. But something weird was going on with Yu's menu. At the top, instead of her name it just said UEMHCP 1001 in a spooky kind of way. And that's it. There were no bars to show how much health or experience she had. And you couldn't even see what level she was on. It was really strange. Imagine walking into a virtual world and seeing a weird mannequin with only 2 buttons on its left side. Items and options. Kirito noticed his friend Asuna had stopped moving, so he went to check it out. He held his breath as he took a closer look. Their friend Yu seemed clueless about what was going on. She stared up at the mannequin with a confused expression. Asuna wondered if this was just another glitch in the system. But Kirito wasn't so sure. He made a low grunt, like he was thinking deeply. I don't think it's a bug, he said finally. This looks like it was meant to be here all along. Kirito's eyes narrowed as he tried to figure out what was going on. What could these mysterious buttons do? Ah, this is so annoying, Asuna exclaimed. I've never seen a place with no game masters around, her friend replied. I never thought about needing one anyway. This game, SAO, is super smooth and hardly ever glitches. Asuna threw up her hands. You're right, let's not worry about it. She gave up trying to figure out the problem, and instead made Yuhui touch the items button on the screen. Asuna did something really cool. She put the sweater on the special window and for a split second, it lit up like magic. Then, poof! It disappeared into her inventory list. Next, Asuna clicked and dragged the sweater's name onto Yu's equipment picture in the window. Suddenly a happy chime sounded, and Yusa's body sparkled for an instant. When the sparkle faded, Yusa's wearing a super cute light pink sweater. Wow! Yusa exclaimed, beaming with delight. Her face lit up with a huge smile. Asuna helped Yuri get dressed in a super cool outfit. Yuri checked herself out, holding out her arms to see how everything looked. Asuna added a few more touches, a skirt that matched the top, black tights and bright red shoes. Yuri was so excited about her new clothes. She rubbed her cheek against the soft sweater and pulled on the hem of her skirt. As they were about to leave, Kirito asked, "Ready to go?" Yuri's response was adorable. She held up her hands and said, "Papa, carry me." Kirito smiled a little shyly, and scooped her up in one arm, holding her close. Kirito turned to his wife Asuna with a serious look. "Hey, just in case something goes down, make sure you've got all your regular gear ready," he said. "We're staying in town, but remember, this is army territory. We don't know what might happen." Asuna nodded, her eyes locked on his. "You're right, we can't be too careful," she agreed. She quickly checked to make sure she had everything she needed, then stood up alongside Kirito and headed for the door. Asuna's feelings were all mixed up. She wanted the people responsible for the mysterious girl they'd just found to get caught. But at the same time, she didn't want to say goodbye to her. It was weird, they'd only known the girl for a day, but Asuna had already grown super attached to her. As she stepped out of the teleport gate in the town of beginnings, Asuna felt a little overwhelmed. It had been months since she'd last visited this bustling city on the first floor of Aincrad. The huge square and towering buildings seemed to stretch on forever. This was the biggest and best city in the game, with everything an adventurer could need. But as Asuna looked around, her heart felt torn. She wasn't sure what the future held, and that uncertainty made her feel uneasy. Imagine a place where you can find a great deal on just about anything, and there are plenty of awesome places to stay. That's what made the town of beginnings so perfect for calling home. But Asuna knew that most of her high-level friends had moved on to other adventures. The army being around was part of the reason. But the main reason was a pretty big deal. It all came down to a memory that still lingered in this town. You see, something huge happened right here in this square. Everyone gathered, looking up at the ceiling in awe. It's crazy to think about how it all started. On a total whim. Asuna grew up with parents who were really successful. Her dad was a businessman and her mom was a super smart scholar. From a pretty young age, Asuna felt like she had big shoes to fill. Her parents had high hopes for her, and she could feel the weight of their expectations every day. Imagine having parents who are super tough on themselves. They're kind to you, but you still worry about letting them down. That's how Asuna felt. Her parents were really strict, and she was afraid of disappointing them. She probably wasn't the only one. Her older brother might have felt the same way. Asuna and her brother did everything their parents expected of them. They went to a private school that their parents had chosen, behaved perfectly, and got amazing grades. They never got into trouble, and they always tried their best. It was like they were following a plan to make their parents proud. Asuna's life took a big turn when her brother left for college. She wanted to make her family proud, so she threw herself into her studies and activities. She only hung out with friends who got the thumbs up from her parents. At first it seemed like a good plan, but as time went on, Asuna started to feel like she was living in a tiny bubble. Everything felt predictable and boring. Her future seemed already planned out. Her parents had chosen the high school she attended, the college she would go to, and even the person she might marry one day. It was like she was stuck on a narrow path, with no room to explore, or make her own choices. Imagine being trapped in a tiny space with no way out. It was a terrifying thought for her. But then something exciting happened. Her brother came home and landed a job at their dad's company. With his new connections, he scored an amazing gaming system called Nerve Gear, and a copy of the hottest new game, Sci-Fi Sword Art Online. His eyes lit up as he told her all about it. It was the world's very first virtual reality multiplayer online game. He couldn't stop raving about how awesome it was going to be. Asuna had never played a video game in her life, but something about Kirito's stories of a secret virtual world really caught her attention. If he had just kept the game to himself, she probably would have forgotten all about it. But Kirito was going out of town for work on the day the new game Sword Art Online came out. On a whim, Asuna asked if she could borrow it for the day. She couldn't wait to try it out and see what all the fuss was about. Asuna was tired of her everyday life. She wanted to see what else the world had to offer. So, she became an adventurer in a totally new town filled with people she'd never met. It was exhilarating. But things took a dramatic turn when a powerful being appeared and announced that this adventure had become a deadly game. Asuna's first thought might surprise you. She worried about her unfinished math homework. She thought, I have to get back home and finish that or my teacher will be furious with me tomorrow. It was a weird thing to think about. But old habits die hard. Right? Asuna's life was already tough enough. She didn't need anything else to go wrong. But things were actually way worse than she could have imagined. Days turned into weeks, and still no one came to help her. She hid out in a small room at an inn, in the town of beginnings, too scared to leave her bed. Asuna was a mess, her mind racing with worries and fears that seemed to get bigger every day. Asuna was freaking out. She yelled and pounded on the walls in frustration. It was winter of 8th grade, and big tests were coming up. If she didn't stay on track, her whole life would be turned upside down. Her daily routine had become super stressful, but then she realized something that really got to her. If she failed her exams because of a video game, her parents wouldn't be worried about how she was doing. They'd be totally disappointed in her. They'd think she blew it over something silly, and that thought was terrifying. Asuna's friends felt bad for her at first, but soon they started to tease her about being stuck. They'd joke about her situation, making her feel even worse. But Asuna had had enough of feeling sorry for herself. One day she decided she wasn't going to wait around for someone to save her. She was going to take matters into her own hands and make a break for it. On her own. Asuna was on a mission to save the day. She wanted to fix the problems that were hurting the people around her, and she knew just how to do it. To get ready, Asuna geared up and studied really hard. She read the instruction book from cover to cover, so she'd know exactly what to do. Then she headed out into the virtual wilderness, ready for adventure. Asuna was super dedicated. She only slept a few hours each night, and spent the rest of her time playing the game and getting better. She used all her brain power and determination to level up as fast as she could, and it didn't take long before she became one of the best players in the game. Meet Asuna, aka The Flash, a fierce warrior with a crazy past. 2 years have passed since she earned her nickname, and now Asuna is 17. When she thinks back to how she used to be, she can't help but cringe. She remembers feeling trapped and hopeless after getting stuck in the game, but that's not all. She also recalls the boring, predictable life she led before all the drama began. It's like she was sleepwalking through her own life. Asuna is relieved to have left that old version of herself behind. Memories can be pretty painful, and for her they brought on a wave of sadness and self-pity. She felt lost and unsure about what it truly meant to be alive. Her whole life was on hold, as she waited for some perfect future she thought was waiting for her. Every moment she lived was just a stepping stone to get to that amazing future, but once the moment passed it was gone. Poof! She had learned a big lesson from playing Sword Art Online's SAO. It was simple: you can't have one thing without the others. Some players got so focused on beating the game and reaching the future that they lost their minds. She used to be like that too, always pushing forward without enjoying the present, but now she realized that wasn't the way to live. Imagine a place where people fell into 3 groups. Some folks got stuck in the past and hung out on the first floor of their favorite inns, reminiscing about old times. Others only cared about having fun right now. And sometimes that meant getting into trouble, or even breaking the law. But there were also some really cool people who could balance it all. They enjoyed the moment, learned from yesterday, and had big plans for a brighter future ahead. A year ago, a cool swordsman with black hair taught Asuna some valuable lessons. After meeting him, her life became way more exciting and meaningful. She felt like she could finally break free from the challenges of the real world. Asuna wanted to live life on her own terms, as long as she had her friend Kirito by her side. She snuggled in closer to Kirito, who was gazing out at the city with a mix of emotions on his face. Asuna was sure he was feeling just as unsure and excited as she was. Asuna gazed up at the huge stone lid above them again. This time the pain wasn't as bad as it used to be. She shook her head, trying to clear out the yucky feelings that were still lingering. Then she looked over at Yuhi, who was snug in Kirito's arms. Yuhi, do you know any of these buildings? Asuna asked. Yuhi scrunched up her face, thinking hard about the stone buildings surrounding the big open square. After a moment she shook her head. I don't know. Kirito tried to make her feel better. Don't worry. Yuhi, the town of beginnings is a really big city, he said with a smile, gently patting her head. Hey, maybe if we walk around some more, she'll remember something, one of them said. Let's check out the central market for now. The other person thought it was a great idea. And they both nodded in agreement. They headed down the main street that ran south. As they walked, Asuna looked around the square with curious eyes. She was surprised by how empty it was. Just 2 years ago, this same spot, the Teleport Gate Plaza in the town of Beginnings, was packed with people. It's a huge space, big enough to fit all 10,000 players who first logged into the game. But now it seemed really quiet and deserted. Imagine a cool spot with a huge clock tower right in the middle. The ground was made up of tons of tiny stones fitted together in a perfect circle. Under the tower you'd find a shimmering blue gate that could transport you to other places instantly. Around the tower were pretty flower beds, one inside the other with small white benches here and there, where you could sit and relax. It was such a lovely day that you'd think people would want to hang out and enjoy the scenery. But instead, everyone was in a hurry. They were either rushing to use the teleport gate or heading out of the area altogether. Nobody seemed to have time to stop and smell the flowers. Literally, the benches were empty, and it was clear that this wasn't a day for lounging around. This spot was usually buzzing with activity, especially since it was near the top of Aincrad, where all the big towns are. You'd normally see lots of players running around, using the teleport squares to get where they needed to go. But today it seemed like everyone was on a mission to get somewhere fast. Imagine being surrounded by people chatting non-stop, recruiters trying to get you to join their parties, street vendors calling out to you and others just hanging around. It was crazy. You could barely make your way through the crowds. Just then a voice broke through the noise. "Hey, Kurito?" He turned to see who was talking to him. The person asked. "How many players do you think are here right now?" Kurito thought for a moment. "That's a good question," he said. "There are about 6,000 survivors in total. And get this, about 30% of them are all crammed into the town of Beginnings, including the army." "Hey, maybe there are only about 1,500 people living here," one of them asked. "It's really quiet, isn't it? I mean, shouldn't we see more people around?" The other person thought for a moment. "You're right. It is pretty quiet. Maybe everyone's at the market." So they walked down the street from the town square towards the market. But even with all the shops and food stalls along the way, the streets were still pretty empty. Asuna walked through the quiet streets surrounded by the empty calls of shopkeepers. It was a bit spooky. She noticed a guy sitting under a big tree in the middle of the road. He seemed really focused on the branches above him. Asuna approached him and said, "Excuse me." The man jumped, looking annoyed, and barked. "What do you want?" Without even turning around, Asuna asked, "Is there a place around here where people can find or post about missing persons?" Finally, the man turned to look at her. The stranger's eyes locked onto hers, sparkling with curiosity. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked. The girl nodded nervously. "Yes, we're searching for someone who can take care of my friend," she said, gesturing to Yui, who was snoozing peacefully in Kurito's arms. The man wore a plain tunic that made it hard to figure out what he did. But when he spotted Yui, his eyes widened in surprise. For a moment he stared at her, then looked away, gazing up at the tree branches above. "A lost kid, huh?" he muttered to himself.